Hey everyone, welcome back to the Let's Talk Teaching podcast. I am your host, Kayla Durkin. Many of you know that you can find me on Instagram at North Dakota Teaching. As we are going through this podcast today, please know that you can reach out to me with any questions that you have. I am more than happy to help you however I can. Today is a continuation of last week's podcast. Last week, we were talking all about how you can stick to your contracted hours. And so we are going to expand on that today and talk all about how you can prioritize your to-do list, which starts with figuring out how you can organize the tasks that you have in a way that you are able to batch what you are working on. I know we talked a little bit about this last week. And so if you have not listened to last week's episode yet, I would really like you to take some time to push pause here, go back to last week's episode, give that a listen, and all of this today will make so much more sense. Before we dive into things today, I really do just want to take some time to say thank you. Thank you so much to all of you who are listeners, all of you who come back every single week. And I really also want to thank those of you who left a review on the podcast. I told you there might be a giveaway coming, so know that's coming. If you leave a review, you are going to be in the raffle for one of our gift cards. So thank you for those of you who did that. And with that, let's get into today's episode. So we all know as classroom teachers, our plates are so full and it seems nearly impossible to get caught up on our to-do list. We have such a limited time and our responsibilities keep growing day after day, week after week. It seems like we have so much on our plate and no task ever seems to be finished. With all of the things that are getting added week after week, it almost seems like all of the tasks that we are trying to accomplish day after day take much longer than they should. As a first-year teacher, I was trying to do every single thing every single day, the grading, the planning, making copies. It was all happening on a daily basis, and I really was just surviving day by day. I got to school nearly an hour before the day began. I always stayed at least an hour late. I took schoolwork home nightly. I came in on the weekends. It really wasn't that big of a deal though, because we had summers off. Right? I'm just kidding. It really wasn't that big of a deal though, because I was wholeheartedly invested into doing whatever I possibly could for my students. Now, if you listened to last week's episode, you know that my priority kind of changed once I met Brent, who quickly became my husband. As I was transitioning from just a single classroom teacher into a teacher who was also a wife, my priorities in life changed and I needed to figure out how I could get my work done during my contracted time. The hardest part, though, is that as a teacher, it is just natural for us. We want to do it all. I was so passionate about teaching, and I have not lost my passion for teaching, but I did have to teach myself that I am a human first and a teacher second. Although I loved that my whole world revolved around teaching, something just had to give, and I needed to find a sustainable balance. I needed to find systems and processes that would cut down on the time that I was spending inside of my classroom. From last week, you know that it took me quite some time to finally get a system down, and you know that I probably went about my system a little bit the wrong way because I was doing what we like to say, building the plane while flying. I was on that plane. I was trying to keep that plane afloat. I didn't want any of my passengers to crash. So I had to do whatever I could to just get by. But I don't want you to have to do that. I don't want you to have to learn from your mistakes. I know you do not have that kind of time. So let's get to it. Let's start putting some systems and processes into place so that you can work smarter, not harder, and get a lot of your life and a lot of your time back. So what we're talking about today is teacher batching. This means we are going to take a specific amount of time and we are going to get one specific thing done in that sitting. We are going to batch our work so that instead of trying to do every single thing every single day, we are doing one thing really, really well one day a week, or maybe only one day a month. For those of you who do know my husband, you know that he's an engineer. You know that he is very rigid in his thinking process. Engineers typically like things done a specific way. And one of the things my husband believes is that multitasking is a lie. When we're trying to work on multiple things at one time, either something gets missed, it gets overlooked, it isn't quite to the standard that it should be, and it's not good for our customers, which in this case happens to be our students. One of the things we talked a lot about at the previous school that I worked at is this is how we do business. And this is what I want you to get to. I want you to get to a place where this is how you do business. You conduct your business in this way so that you can put everything you have into teaching, but you can also put everything into every other thing that matters the most to you, into time with your family, into the things that you enjoy, into your hobbies, into your activities. Whatever fuels your cup, I want you to be able to give just as much to that as you do to teaching. So, our goal here today is to get you to a place where instead of multitasking and trying to do every single task every single day, we're going to work ahead. We're going to allow ourselves to focus our time and energy on one specific task at a time. You are no longer going to be grading papers every single day of the week. You are no longer going to be making copies every single day of the week. You are no longer going to be lesson planning every single day of the week. You are no longer going to be making bell ringers every single day of the week. Do you get my point here? No more doing every single thing every single day. Instead, we're going to choose one task to do each day. And when we work on that one task, we are going to batch it so that the work is done for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 weeks at a time. An example of this would be your bell ringers. This was a struggle for me at first too. I went from trying to come up with my bell ringers every single day before every single class period. In the 3 minutes that my students were transitioning, instead of being at the door and greeting them, I was surviving and I was coming up with those bell ringers before every single class period, every single day, 6 bell ringers every single day before every single class period started. It was exhausting and it didn't start my class out on the right foot. Finally, I realized, okay, this is another thing that I can sit down and batch. I am going to make all of my bell ringers at one time for the next month. Now, typically, you want your bell ringers to go along with what your unit is, whatever you're teaching in class. So you have to align your bell ringers to that unit. Sometimes we don't, sometimes we do. I know everyone gets free choice in whatever they're doing, but that's actually another thing that we're going to be talking about today. If we know what we're teaching, then we can make these bell ringers, then we can sit down and make them all at one time. And then they are taken off your plate for the next month. You don't have to think about it every single day before every single class, but also know that you do not have to reinvent the wheel. You do not have to make every single bell ringer if you don't want to. There is this magical thing called teachers pay teachers, and you can pay someone a little bit of money to do the work for you. Now, I know this comes out of your own budget, but for me as a classroom teacher, I often had to think about this. Okay, would I rather pay $10 and have something at my fingertips for the entire year? Or would I rather spend tons and tons of time trying to create it myself when someone could probably make it better for me? For me, for my bell ringers, classes like computer applications, keyboarding, things like that, those were not bell ringers that I felt I had the capacity to make. Instead, you guys know my forte is math. So my bell ringers actually became math talks, which I started using with my 6th and 7th graders. Holy cow, did their fluency, their conceptual understanding, their mathematical thinking, their communication in math, all of that improved. A, because I was using quality questions that served them, and B, because I was using questions that aligned to the standards and the tasks that we were doing in the classroom. And honestly, those math talks are one of my very best sellers on Teachers Pay Teachers. I couldn't keep them to myself. I knew that there were other teachers out there who were just like me, trying to survive day by day by day. So if you do not want to make all of your bell ringers on your own, just know, go on Teachers Pay Teachers, whatever you're teaching, pay $5, $6, $7, $8, have them done for the entire year, and then you don't even have to think about it ever again. Here are a few more examples. Instead of printing off all of the spelling lists each Monday, try printing off every single spelling list for the next 6 weeks at one time. Paperclip them together, set them aside to be used in the weeks to come, and then you don't have to think about it ever again. And also, this was another thing that Teachers Pay Teachers took off my plate for me as a 4th grade classroom teacher. I started the school year trying to type out and make every single spelling list look super cute, and I didn't have the time to do it. It was stressing me out. I went on Teachers Pay Teachers. I paid $6. I had every single spelling test for the entire year. It was super cute, laid out super well. The format was the same for the entire year. All I had to do was print every single one of them at one time. I cut the sheets in half. I paper clipped them. I wrote the date that I was going to be sending them home on a sticky note. I put them in my filing cabinet, and all of my spelling lists were ready to go for the remainder of the year. Something I could take off my plate, something I could sit down and do all at one time, and then I never had to think about it again. Some other examples: instead of planning your math lessons day by day, begin with the end in mind. You do not have to start by mapping out your entire year, but maybe you start by mapping out one unit at a time. Sit down and look at what is your next unit going to look like. This will allow you to know your content and standards better. This will allow you to feel more confident in what you're teaching every single day because you're not coming up with a lesson at the very last minute. This will allow you time to pre-assess your students before you even begin because you've taken time to think about what you're going to be teaching. This is going to allow you to know what you're actually going to be assessing on, which is the very first thing you should do before you even start a unit. And many teachers feel like they don't have time. But if you take time to batch your lesson planning, start with one unit at a time, print and gather all of the resources for that entire unit at one time instead of trying to scramble day by day, and you will feel so much more prepared and confident as a classroom teacher. A few other examples that I know I've shared before: instead of trying to send 1 or 2 positive emails every single day, try sitting down and sending 5 to 10 emails at one time and do that once a week. For me, I had about 70 to 80 different students, so I couldn't just send 1 or 2 positive emails every single week, or it would take me practically it would take me more than the whole school year to send a positive email to every single parent. So instead, I would sit down, I would take my list, I would try to send 10 quick emails. Took me, I don't know, 20 minutes. It doesn't have to be much. If you spend 2 minutes on every single email and you want to send 10 positive emails a week, there you go. 20 minutes in and out. You don't have to think about it. And you don't have to sit down 10 separate times, pull open your email, figure out who you're going to send it to. Those are the kind of things that waste time. Instead of trying to sit down and restart a task again and again and again, let's just sit down and spend some quality time doing something that we can pour our heart and soul into, and then put it away and not think about it for another week. So for those of you who are listening and you're like, okay, I get it, these are great examples, but where do I begin? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out what are all of your teacher responsibilities that you go through throughout the week. You might have to pause this podcast. You might want to come back to this. You can certainly continue listening and then come back and do all of this later, but take some time, take a notebook. I mean, you can type it too, but I'm a paper pencil kind of person. Take a notebook and create a list of every single thing that you do in your classroom on a weekly or a daily basis. From creating your morning meeting lessons and activities, filing paperwork, working through standards, entering grades, sending positive emails, making your bell ringers, list out every single task. Some things that you might forget to list include, if you are a PBIS school, you are doing some sort of positive behavior intervention system, turning in those behavior slips, turning in your check-in, check-out folders, taking things back down to the library, dropping things off at the office, thinking about your daily 5, your center activities, your weekly agendas. All of those things should go on your list. So take some time and just list out every single teacher responsibility that you can think of that you do on a daily or a weekly basis. I mean, you don't really have to list out like you turn on your classroom lights, you turn on your projector. Yes, you do those things, but you can't really batch turning on your projector because you have to turn your projector on and off every single day. I don't know about you, but once upon a time, I worked in a school, and if they came into our classroom and our projector was on and we weren't using it, they were pretty upset because the light bulbs are apparently expensive. So, I mean, yes, you should turn your projector off, but that's not something you can batch, so don't bother putting that on your list. The next thing we're going to do, and again, this is a little bit easier if you've used paper and pencil, but of course we have technology, we have Apple pencils, we have all of those fancy things. So do whatever you need to do, but we are going to use highlighters or symbols, and we're going to start sorting our responsibilities. So when I started doing this, I just started circling things in different colors. Of course, you could highlight them in different colors, whatever. Our goal here is to group them together into similar categories. So for example, if you have multiple preps or you teach multiple content areas, you might have wrote reading bell ringers, math bell ringers, social studies bell ringers, whatever it is. Those kind of all get grouped into one category. Once we've kind of figured out what goes with what, now we want to start aligning those responsibilities to the days of the week. But keep in mind, some of the things that are on your list might be things that you are going to sit down, you are going to batch them all at one time, and you might not have to do it ever again. So the example that I gave you was the spelling list. Once I just gave in and bought that Teachers Pay Teachers resource, all I had to do was go to the printer. I printed out every single list at one time. I cut them all in half. I paper clipped them together. I wrote the weeks on them. I never had to look at it again. So that is not something that I'm going to worry about after I get it done because it's already done for the entire year. Sending home reading logs, sending home current events, any of those types of things. If you can sit down and do all of that in one setting, you should certainly put that on a list of things that you are going to get done. But this isn't going to be something that you are going to assign to a day of the week. Instead, what you are going to be assigning to the day of the week are things that have to get done on a weekly basis. We need to figure out which days make the most sense for each task to be completed. Does it make the most sense to have it done on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday? For us, I believe I gave this example last week, but if I didn't, our eligibility reports were pulled on Wednesdays, which means that all of our grading had to be up to date by Wednesday morning. With this, Tuesdays quickly became my grading days. I knew I couldn't keep up with grading every single day of the week, so eventually I gave up trying to do that. It wasn't sustainable for me. On next week's podcast, I'm actually going to dive even deeper into how I specifically did all of this grading meticulously so that I only had to do it in 1 week. So don't let the grading portion hold you back. Know that that is coming for you next Friday when next Friday's podcast comes out. I wish I could tell you every single thing all in one episode, but then our episodes get super long and people already think my episodes are too long. So stay tuned. It's coming next week. Anyway, my point here is that it made the most sense for me to do all of my grading on Tuesdays because it had to be done by Wednesdays. Now, was that kind of last minute? Yes, it was, but it makes the most sense because I wanted every single paper that I collected to go into that eligibility report. That way my students couldn't say, well, Mrs. Durkin, I turned that in on Monday. Why didn't you have it entered? So I waited until I had everything collected on Tuesdays. And I updated the grades for Wednesdays. So when we think about my whole schedule, this is kind of what I tried to do. On Mondays, I spent my time focusing on batch planning. So on Mondays, I was going to be planning out an entire unit at a time. I was going to try and batch something for the rest of the school year. Mondays were focused on lesson planning and batching things. So for example, one of my Mondays might have been spent printing out all of those spelling lists. My next Monday might have been spent getting all of my centers ready for that week. My next Monday might have been spent getting all of my bell ringers ready. You get the point. I wasn't doing the same specific task every single Monday, but I was batching something every single Monday. Also, sometimes I didn't have things that I needed to get done. So instead, it kind of could become a miscellaneous day. I sent out my positive emails. That took 20 minutes. And yes, we feel like teachers do not get any prep time. For us, our contracted day started. So this is one example, I guess. One of the schools that I worked at, my contracted day started at 7:50 and students came at 8 o'clock. So in the morning, I only had 10 minutes of time. I got a 30-minute lunch break and a 45-minute planning period. And then at the end of the day, school ended at 3:20. And then we had until 3:50 for our contracted time if there weren't staff meetings, whatever. I didn't have a ton of after school meetings, but there are staff meetings, there are IEPs we have to attend, all of that good stuff. So my point here is I pretty much always had a little bit of a lunch period. I always had a little bit of that 45-minute prep unless I had to cover someone's class. And then I almost always had that 30 minutes after school. So I was using the 30 minutes after school, the 45-minute prep that I had, and then I was actually using some of my lunchtime as well because I want to use the time that I have in the most productive way that I possibly could. So I actually had an hour and 45 minutes a day if you count my lunch period. Well, I guess you could even add the 10 minutes in before school, but I never really counted that because I couldn't really get anything done in 10 minutes. So I had an hour and 45 minutes during my day, and I used every single minute on the days that I was feeling super productive. So on those Mondays, sending the positive emails, filing things, which you guys know, I really don't file anything. It just had to be super, super important for me to file it away. I'm a firm believer that you should just keep everything on your computer because it takes you more time to go to the filing cabinet and find that thing you need a copy of and then take it to the copy machine and try to make copies. That is a nightmare. If you just keep it on your computer, you can either send it to the printer or you can send it to the print shop and then it's good to go. Also, when you keep things in filing cabinets, you might just end up using it too long. And I am just not someone that wants to do the same activity 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a row because things get old and things change and we need to stay up to date with all of the other cool things that are going on. So anyway, enough about Mondays. Tuesdays were for grading. Wednesdays, I finalized my weekly lesson plans for the next week. Thursdays, I made any last minute copies that I needed and I started prepping all of the supplies that I needed for the next week. And then on Fridays, I would post my next week's lesson plans. I would lay out all of the materials I needed for Monday. I would clean up my classroom. I would write up my agenda board. I wanted everything done so that when I came on Monday, I could feel ready to start my week off the right way. So, now just another reminder, when you're thinking about planning for a month at a time, when you're thinking about planning out some of those units, your responsibilities are not always going to look the same. You aren't going to plan out your bell ringers every single Monday if you plan out your bell ringers for a month at a time. One week, you might spend your Monday on morning meetings. The next Monday, you might spend planning out your art activities for the semester or the trimester. The next Monday, you might be working on math or reading or science or social studies. But once you get into the groove of planning and batching things for an extended amount of time, you will never go back. This is the way we do business. We take the time that we have, the protected time that we have in our contracted day, and we batch things out so that we do not have to worry about them. This definitely goes back to my curriculum mapping workshop that I have, which you guys know changed my life. Once you get into the groove of planning out your unit at a time, you are definitely going to be ready to map out your entire year. So be sure to check out my curriculum mapping workshop, ndteaching.com/map. All of the information that you need is there for you. So definitely check it out. But overall, we know your teacher plate is full. And if you keep trying to balance every single item on your plate every single day, something is going to fall off your plate and break. And honestly, that something that falls off your plate, it might be you. You might be the thing that gets neglected because you're trying to balance every other thing that's going on in your life. We know that teacher burnout is a real thing. We know that the expectations for teachers are out of this world. If you are looking for permission to slow down, to process what you're doing, to be able to look at the weeks ahead and know what's actually coming up, you need to start batching your teacher responsibilities. There's just no other option. And you don't have to start by batching out every single thing all at one time. Start small. Pick one task that you're going to start doing once a week. That's it. Just one. If you want to start with grading next Friday after I give you the podcast all about that, fantastic. If you want to start with something else, like looking at your centers or looking at your bell ringers or looking at your morning meetings and mapping them out for the entire month, that is fantastic. But pick one small thing, start there and try to get into the groove of that. And once you feel comfortable, once you've got that down, pick another one and then another one. If you can get yourself into a weekly schedule, you are going to be so much more productive during your prep times because you are going to be saying, I am choosing to spend this time that I've been given right now getting this thing done that I do every single Monday of the week because I value my time at home. I value my health. I value my family, and I want to be able to give them the time that they deserve. Yes, you have to put in those 8 contracted hours at school. Yes, there are things that you also might have to do after school sometimes, but our point here is that you are a human first and a teacher second. If you use your time wisely in the classroom, if you can get yourself to a point where you are batching things out and you aren't trying to think about them every single day of the week, you will find a little bit of your sanity and you will truly, I promise you, avoid some of that burnout. We cannot control our class sizes. We cannot control what's going on down the hall. We cannot control our students' home lives. We cannot control what our colleagues are saying about us. We cannot control some of the mandates that are being placed on us. We cannot control some of the responsibilities that are being added, but we can control how we do our planning and how we get our work done. So count that as a win. Take it and run with it. I know I say this all the time, but you are so much more capable than you know. I absolutely believe that this is something that you can start implementing, and I know it is going to make a huge difference in your life. So I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Come on over to Instagram. Let's chat, share your thoughts and opinions. I need to know what's running through your head right now, but I would also like to know what you think of this podcast. Before you leave us today, please take some time to leave a review. I want you to win that gift card. I promise the opportunity is coming soon. And with that, thank you so much for everything. Stay tuned. Next week, we are talking all about how you can batch your grading and only do grading one day of the week. So get excited. I know that in itself is going to change your life. Alrighty, friends, I will see you later. please reach out to me on Instagram. Let's chat. Have the best weekend ever, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the North Dakota Teaching Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort. Be sure to tune in to the next episode for more teaching tips to make an impact. Until next time.